Today is going to be a fun episode. So we got Epstein updates. Of course, we can't seem to go away from Epstein. Every time I make an Epstein video, I'm like, okay, cool, I can stop talking about Epstein for a little bit, and then something new happens. So we're going to cover Epstein, then we're going to cover the 2 Chinese smugglers at U of M, then we're going to cover the ice raids at that pot farm in California, and lastly, we have a bees update. So if you're not familiar with what we're doing here, this is the Pipeline Podcast. I believe it's episode 12 today. Last week, we went over the big, beautiful bill, which just means this week, I'm very excited for the episode because I didn't really get to talk about any topics I wanted to go over last week. All of these topics that we're covering tonight are new developing stories to topics that we've covered in the past. So this is going to be a banger episode. If you're not familiar with any of these stories and you want more background information on them, they are all covered on the channel, so go check it out. Most of these stories I'm sure you've heard of already, so this is just the latest on that. And without further ado, let's check out our first source. So obviously the first thing we're going to cover is Epstein. That way I can put Epstein in the title and thumbnail and people are going to click on it. Not saying I want to really cover Epstein, I think it's just so overplayed at this point, but there are some new updates, so we're going to go over those first. We have just a video here, and it's kind of just like Trump trying to downplay Epstein, Trump spewing the don't talk about Epstein rhetoric again. And this is something we haven't covered on the channel.
Mr. President, I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so upset about how it's been handled? Why do you think that is?
First, I do want to stop there. It's not just his supporters that are upset about the Epstein thing. It's everybody. This one's bipartisan. Unless you are like maybe implicated with Epstein, then you might be against the files being released. But other than that, I don't know who wouldn't want these Epstein files released. The only people who wouldn't want them released are like pro-pedophile supporters. That just doesn't make sense. So it is a loaded question, but either way, let's check out Trump's response to it.
They would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And the credible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would say, let them have it.
He's saying like bad people want the Epstein info released, which doesn't make sense. But we do know why he's saying that. He's saying that because he wants the Epstein stuff to go away. So that makes sense. He also saying he doesn't know why people even care about Epstein, but he definitely knows why because he campaigned on releasing the files. So keep that in mind. The things that he says might not necessarily be true, but the things he's saying is like try to stop talking about Epstein. That's what he wants to happen. He wants it to kind of go away. And it's not gonna. And every time he says, like, stop talking about it, it's just gonna make more people talk about it. So it's so great to follow. It's pretty funny. And then we have more updates on Trump and Epstein. So this is another video. I believe this one came out after that first video we just watched. But I could be wrong because basically both of these videos are new within the last day or so. So this is just another response about Epstein from Trump. Let's check it out.
Mr. President, I know you want to move past all this intrigue over the Epstein files, but I do want to ask you to clarify something you said this morning. You said this was all a hoax. Has your Attorney General told you this was a hoax? What evidence have you seen of that?
No, it's not the Attorney General, no. I know it's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. Some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net, and so they try and do the Democrats' work.
So yeah, we see those 2 videos about Trump talking about Epstein, and it's really just more of Trump saying like, all right, we're done with it. That's all you're going to get. And so that kind of sucks. We even have 211 House Republicans voting to block the Epstein files, to block the release of it, which is not all of the Republicans, but I'm pretty sure a lot of these House Republicans believe if they don't vote to block it, they might get primaried by Trump. Trump might fund or back a different candidate, so they lose their House seat. So I kind of think that's why the House Republicans voted to block the files, because they don't want to upset Trump. They're just kind of like, all right, man, whatever you want, like it's fine. If you don't want the files released, Trump, then we're not going to release them. I think that's kind of what's happening here, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. If you have any more hot takes, more new developing stories about Epstein, leave a comment, let us know. We always like to go over the good stuff. I would say none of this stuff today is really juicy, but it is a good update. If you want updates on Epstein, if you want more information, check out our channel. I think we got a whole playlist of just about Epstein because there's that much shit about him. And then we're going to go on to our second story today. So this is something that we covered a couple weeks ago. University of Michigan faces federal investigation after arrest of 2 Chinese scientists. Where we left off was the 2 Chinese scientists got arrested. So they were trying to smuggle biohazards into the United States to the University of Michigan. And they're from China. And the biohazards that they were bringing in, at least one of them is confirmed to be based from Wuhan. We all know the conspiracy stuff about Wuhan. You put your tinfoil hat on and you might believe that's where COVID came from. I don't know, Border Patrol or something must have caught them, or TSA, and they're like, what the fuck is this? And where are you coming from? And so they got arrested. Now there's a federal investigation on it, and we're going to cover that today. There's a little 3-minute video about it. I haven't really watched it yet, so we'll just go over it and give our hot takes.
Back in court today.
It is the second case in 1 week of a Chinese national allegedly committing a similar crime.
The most recent suspect is a researcher.
So we've covered this. I want to talk about the federal investigation. All right, let's see what they say.
Her hearing was postponed today.
The 7 News Detroit reporter Darren Cunningham spoke with a former FBI agent to get a handle on the answers authorities might be trying to uncover and an expert about the biological material.
Chong Shin-han appeared before the judge in an orange prison jumpsuit. Her attorney asked the judge for more time to review her case because of a bond issue. So the detention hearing is postponed for a couple of days.
She's highly educated. She's working towards her doctorate. It just seems to defy common sense and logic to go and do this.
Former FBI agent Andy Bartnowak says it makes no sense for a research student headed to study at the University of Michigan to risk criminal charges and losing her J-1 visa when all she had to do was disclose what she was shipping to the U.S. for her research.
It's interesting because it appears from the complaint that there's nothing in there that suggests that any of the materials that she brought in could have any, harmful effect.
The biological materials in this case are C. elegans or roundworms. Michigan State University.
She was bringing in some kind of roundworms into the country and didn't disclose it, is what they're saying. Which I'm pretty sure we already knew that. I wanted to cover the federal charges or the federal investigation. So let's just finish out this video and then we'll dive into the article.
Professor Martin Chilvers explains.
This C. elegans, the nematode or roundworm, is widely prevalent around the world. It's a naturally occurring organism. It is used a lot in research for genetics and developmental biology because it is so easy to work with.
Chilvers says the organism is like...
So that was someone that's in this, the smuggler girls, same field, and he's like, oh yeah, we just work with them a lot. And they are available worldwide, which is so why did you smuggle it instead of sourcing them from the US? And if they're that easy to work with, yeah, again, maybe don't travel with them if you could just get them easily when you're at U of M.
A lab rat, easy to manipulate and study for research purposes. So, if it poses no national security or agricultural threat, Bartnowak says that leaves the question, why did Han allegedly lie twice about shipping it? The first time when filling out shipping documentation, the second time at Detroit Metro Airport, where she was questioned by customs agents.
I think that's part probably of what law enforcement is trying to determine in the course of their investigation is, was she doing this because she was scared and made a bad decision? or was there something else? Is there something else going on here?
The University of Michigan released a statement Tuesday, emphasizing its commitment to integrity.
So yeah, peep that date. This is June 10th. So this is stuff we've already covered. But that's a little update on what's going on. And then the title here at least says faces federal investigation. I want to talk about that. Okay, yeah, last updated July 16th, posted July 15th, and it's saying on Tuesday, the Education Department opened an investigation into the university's funding. So let's see when that would have been. It would have been yesterday, right? July 15th, Tuesday. So yeah, it would have been a day ago. So this is what I want to cover. I don't know why that video doesn't talk about this at all. Kind of annoying. It's another video here, but I don't want to get lost watching videos all day. If they find that these two were like they're like Chinese smugglers and they're guilty of like some kind of espionage, basically the education department could pull the funding for like U of M. They've been doing stuff like that before, like threatening funding for not like this kind of thing. So it's possible that like if they find if there's like some kind of conspiracy that like Michigan was letting these Chinese people like bring in biohazards to research them, maybe U of M gets their funding pulled from the Department of Education. There's also another lawsuit against University of Michigan right now for like for their law review being racist with their like practices to like pick students to work at the law review. Apparently that's racist. And so they're getting sued for that. And so they could also lose their funding because of that. So they're probably a little freaking out right now. I don't think U of M loses their funding for this. I imagine it was just these Chinese nationals like acted on their own or like together, but not in coordination with the university. That would be crazy. But we will cover that, especially on this channel, Conspiracy Channel. That would be a really good one. Apparently, U of M has a history of downplaying its vulnerabilities to foreign influence. Chief Investigative Counsel of the department, Paul Moore, said that UM's research laboratories remain vulnerable to sabotage. So that's fun. Oh, this is kind of like what this is all about. So it joins efforts from Republicans in Congress who have urged universities to cut research ties with China. So like that's kind of why this is like a big news story right now, just because it has links to China. Because China steals IP. They say it here as China exploits the relationships to steal technology. Really, they do steal like a lot of IP and stuff. They buy like companies that are going out of business so that they can like own the rights to like their technology and like reproduce it and stuff. Like that's a real thing. University of Michigan already entered a partnership with one Chinese university, University of Shanghai, in January because of this pressure from the Republican Party. They're saying it's a security risk. So the new investigation demands financial records from Michigan, along with info about research collabs with institutions outside the U.S. University of Michigan is being accused of incomplete, inaccurate, and untimely in its public disclosures around funding from foreign sources, which, if that's true, then that could be something that another country could use to, like a vulnerability another country could use to take advantage of like United States research. If that's true. I don't really know. That's, this is all ongoing. The case isn't closed on this. So yeah, it was two separate instances here of two Chinese nationals bringing in biohazards to the U of M. It happened. It wasn't just like a one-time thing. It happened twice within like a week. The university condemns it. Some school officials have downplayed the vulnerability of research collabs with Chinese institutions. It looks like it's possible that the U of M was getting foreign money from China that they weren't disclosing. And because they were getting that money, maybe they were more lax on foreign nationals bringing in these kind of things, when in reality they're supposed to disclose it. That could be like the smoking gun that they use like in court, just as a reason for U of M to lose federal funding. And I think that's where we're at. So it just gives other like statistics here about like Chinese nationals or like Chinese, like international students. So yeah, we are going to be following the story. I want to see how this case ends up going. Here's kind of what I think will happen. I think it will be proven that these Chinese students didn't disclose it, not because they were like trying to do espionage, but because it's just easier to not disclose it. And they really were going to use it for research purposes. They just didn't disclose that. But then again, that still means that U of M could lose some funding because of this, because they really should have been more strict and caught up on that. if one of these Chinese researchers brought into like a U of M lab something like those worms we saw, maybe they should have double checked and said like, hey, where'd you get those? I need to see the documentation before you use it in here, because that could be a vulnerability for our university and we could lose funding over it. So that's kind of what I think happened. So I think U of M might lose some funding, might get a slap on the wrist, unless there are other lawsuits at the same time that also turn out bad for U of M. And then that could create like a larger punishment for them. I guess we'll have to see what happens. As for the Chinese nationals, I don't think they're going to go to jail. I think they'll get released. Maybe they lose their visa or something. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens there. We'll follow it. I'll give you an update when there's an update. On to our next story. That pot farm raided in California. I think it was like South LA. Camarillo. So there was a huge raid on Camarillo on this place called Glass House Farms. It was like a pot farm. There was a lot of illegals there, and it turns out there was also like children laborers. I think it was like 14 children, a couple guys that were like convicted predators or like had serious charges out for them. All of these people that were arrested were illegal. We covered the riots that happened because of this ICE raid the other day on the channel. We didn't cover everything, so there's basically like, here's just one source, like child predator found. They started releasing like the charges they had on some of these people. And we're going to go over that today. 361 illegal migrants were arrested. It was at 2 marijuana farms in Southern California. We saw some video of that earlier in the week. It looks like 14 of them were children, one as young as 14 years old, which like when it is children and they're illegals, it gets a little bit weird because it means that these children could be more easily taken advantage of. So you do have to look out for that. But it's very possibly that these kids were getting paid not a legal amount. DHS secretary says the conditions for the children looked like exploitation, forced labor, and potentially human trafficking or smuggling. Yeah, while facing assault or even gunfire. Because it is true, some of these people had like guns on them. Some of these farmers. Which again isn't weird, but you consider all these circumstances. It's a pot farm, 350 illegals working there. A lot of the illegals have criminal charges against them. There's a lot of children. Some of these guys have guns on them. And then we did see the response of the riots outside when these raids happened. And yeah, it does look like if children are working there, they are working with some dangerous people. And I'm sure they're getting paid like under the table, or maybe it's kind of like, oh, hey, my kid needs like daycare. Can I just bring him? And the boss man's just like, oh yeah, just have him like, go pick weeds or something. Like it could be something like that. But yeah, I mean, human trafficking, possibly. I guess we'll have to see about that. Other convictions, we had rape, serial burglary, hit and run, DUIs, illegal migrants. They weren't all good people. One guy was already deported before. And it is illegal. First, it's illegal to come into the country illegally, but it's also illegal to get deported and then hop the border again. That's illegal. One guy had a rape and DUI conviction. A source noted that the ICE office smelled like weed heavily because it was on a pot farm. There was 500 rioters. We covered the riots about this. That was a really fun episode. You should really check it out. It was like our very last episode, so go check that out. That was so much fun. Several demonstrators hurled rocks at the officers, so we didn't cover that in the episode, but yeah, they were doing that. They did that at the LA riots as well. So yeah, this is just another source on it. The farm that they raided already had an open child labor complaint. And that's probably one of the reasons they picked this farm to raid in the first place, because it was on their radar. So yeah, they received a complaint that it had employed minors. But again, it's not necessarily illegal to employ them. But maybe if they're here illegally, it says here, so it's because they're working at a pot farm. So if you're under 21, you can't work there because it's marijuana. So that's why the child labor is kind of a big deal here, which is actually something I didn't even think about, because I was like, oh, these kids aren't smoking marijuana. They could still farm it. You could still work there, but I guess not. You need to be 21. So like, that's probably why ICE had this farm on their radar in the first place. They kind of had heard about some things going on. It wasn't like a racist raid. Like they weren't doing it just because there was a lot of Spanish people or people speaking Spanish. Like it was literally on their radar. They knew about it. Yeah, potential exploitation, forced labor, human trafficking. They're saying they rescued these children. I'm sure the children disagree. And this is quite sad, but I do want to talk about this. So one worker died after he fell 3 stories trying to evade agents. And so here's kind of the problem, because we have like Democrats like in Newsom going around saying like, oh, these ICE agents, if you have dark skin and they see you on the street, they're going to kidnap you and you're going to disappear and they might torture you. And I think that's kind of why this guy was so scared of the ICE agents, because he kind of believed all that stuff, that he might just get kidnapped and sent to like CCOT in El Salvador instead of just getting deported. And so he was willing to jump off 3 stories, and he ended up dying, which, if you ever heard of this suicide cliff, it was like a battle in World War II. The US was like taking the island from the Japanese, but the Japanese had spread so much propaganda to the locals on the island, saying things like, oh, the US is going to torture you and kill you if they find you, that a lot of these people jumped off the cliff rather than get captured by the US soldiers. So I think that's kind of what's happening here, because it's like propaganda. We have a source that actually talks about it. It's like propaganda from Newsom. Like, let's check out. There's a good quote that he has here that, like, if you're here illegally and you read this quote and you believe it, might make you want to jump off a cliff if you're about to get detained by ICE.
California Governor Gavin Newsom's office calling the raids inhumane, saying agents continue to detain U.S. citizens and racially profile Americans, ripping families apart and disappearing parents and workers into cruel federal detention.
It's kind of shitty for him to be saying this, because I think people might believe it. So he's saying any U.S. citizen could get racially profiled by ICE and torn apart from their family and disappeared and put in a cruel federal detention center. And he's going around saying that kind of stuff, and it's like spewing propaganda that these people that are here illegally might actually end up believing. Here's the thing. If this guy just crossed the border and was just working at the farm, all that's going to happen to him is he's just going to get deported. Now, a reason, if he had maybe like charges against him, like cartel links or something, that might make more of a reason for him to like jump off 3 stories. But even then, he's not going to get tortured or anything like that. If that was the case, why would ICE be using like tear gas and less than lethal bullets? They would just come in with like real bullets. Anyway, this kind of stuff here is like propaganda, in my opinion. It's like fear mongering. And then here, this video talks about how the people who own the farm donate to Newsom's campaign, which could be a conflict of interest for Newsom while he's saying this stuff.
And now we're learning more about the farm's owner. Glasshouse Farms president and co-founder Graham Farrar has been called a pioneer in growing so-called environmentally friendly cannabis. And he has a history of donating to Democratic candidates and causes, including a hefty $10,000 donation to Gavin Newsom back in 2018.
Fun fact about Gavin Newsom. There is some other evidence that if you like donate to his campaign, or if you're like friends with him, he'll look the other way. So what could have happened here is this dude that is the president of Glassdoor Farms donated to Newsom's campaign with the thinking that like, oh, now I can hire like child labor and pay them less and make more money. California is going to not really look into it because I have good favor with Newsom. If anyone remembers, a couple of years ago, Newsom also had that weird, stupid law in his minimum wage for like food service workers, where it was like, if you bake bread, you could pay less than minimum wage in your restaurant. It was like a really weird law, something like that. And then it turns out that one of his close friends owns like a Panera franchise, so they would be exempt from the minimum wage hike. Newsom does favors for his friends like this. There's like real examples of that. So I think that's what's happening here. He's getting money for these pot farms that are using illegal underage workers and criminals, by the way, which is like, I mean, come on. Newsom's going around saying, oh, ICE doesn't just detain illegals, they detain U.S. citizens if you're dark-skinned, and they'll put you in a concentration camp. They'll take you from your family. And in my opinion, it is kind of propaganda. Do with that information what you will. And that's really the end of this story. I'm sure we'll have more ICE updates and protest/riot updates in the future. That stuff seems to be pretty fun to cover. This is our last story tonight. It's the bees. We're going to talk about the bees. So where we left off on the bees was Trump cut funding to the Department of Agriculture, USDA. And because Trump cut the funding, the mainstream media narrative was a bunch of workers got fired and now they can't do research to figure out why the bees are dying, which is fake news, and we kind of covered why. But I just want to pull up this article because it still says it, the article's still up. So it says, like, in just a few weeks, Trump has virtually killed bee research with massive funding cuts across the department, crippling the ongoing work. So we do have an update. That was fake news because the ongoing work was not crippled. The USDA actually figured out why these bees are dying. So in case you thought that the Trump cuts were making the bees die, no, that's fake news. And I'm going to kind of play a clip of what got me onto this, where I found out the update on the bees. And it was this podcast here with Paul Stamets on JRE. And he talks about the bees. So let's check it out. It's very interesting. It's how we're going to save the bees.
Which is wonderful. There's a new startup company called Quorum by my friend Chris Kentrovitz. Disclosure, I'm involved with them. But they have a metarhizium, a fungus that kills mites. So it's also been approved by the USDA for thrips and some other greenhouse insects. It's not toxic to fish, not toxic to humans. So the combination of using metarhizium with the agaricon and other polypore mushroom mycelium, we think has a great potential future. So I think there's a lot of resources in nature that can augment conventional agricultural practices.
So there we go. He's saying there's this fungus that you put on the bees and it keeps the mites away. And so let's go back to this USDA article. Researchers find viruses from meticide-resistant parasitic mites are a cause of recent honeybee colony collapses. So this is it right here. He's talking about this article. He's like, he read this, Paul Stamets, I believe is his name. He read this USDA research study, and he's like, oh, okay, the bees are dying from this parasitic mite. And he's saying that, oh, there's a USDA-approved fungus that kills the mites. So they should the beekeepers need to start using this fungus to kill the mites, and that's how you save the bees. And then this is just like a company, I think, that sells the fungus. And I think this video explains how it works. So let's go ahead and watch it. If you're still not fully understanding what we're even talking about right now, maybe this video will help clear it up. Also, check out our bees episode. I guess this is just the device that they use to kill the mites.
This is fun. You can see the bees are all the way inside, and they've navigated through the maze. So cool.
So yeah, I guess this is just like a concept video of this bead mushroomed feeder. Oh, let's see what this is.
The largest beehive experiment ever conducted in the world. 532 beehives testing the effects of these extracts in helping bees survive.
So what we're doing is we are sampling these beehives to check virus levels, and then we're also treating them.
So here we're seeing some bee research being done. So it looks like Trump cuts didn't stop all the bee research.
Them with mushroom extracts, which is what we're testing here.
So yeah, mushroom extracts kill the mites. And the mites are what's causing the colony die-offs right now. This is the solution.
So one of the beauties of the fungal extract for controlling the viruses in honeybees is the ease of use for commercial beekeepers. They're used to handling products like this as far as mixing something into their sugar syrup and feeding it to bees. It's very simple to adopt.
If our ecosystems fail, what do people do for food? And this is fundamental to saving our ecosystems. So I'm hoping that people will recognize mushrooms for the important roles that they play in the ecosystem we're just now beginning to discover before it's too late.
That explained it pretty well. If this is like all real, I'm guessing more beekeepers will adopt these this like fungus and feed it to their bees so that it kills the mites. That's kind of the bees update. And also, you know, part of the update, because we were talking on a different episode about how the Trump USDA cuts that then mainstream news is claiming halted bee research is kind of fake news. And then here's just evidence that it was, in case you did see articles a while ago that like Trump cuts are going to kill the bees. We just have research from the USDA that says it's these mites that are causing the honeybee collapse. And then Paul Stamets talks about this fungus that's USDA approved that you can give to your bees that keeps the mites away.
The mushroom man wants to give you mushrooms on your for the bees.
Yeah, but it's like proven though that this stuff it's like approved to kill the mites.
What about Bill Gates and his robot bees?
Well, Bill Gates is probably the one that's funding the mites that are killing the bees. He's the evil guy in this story. There's these meticide resistant parasitic mites that are causing bee colonies to collapse. That's probably the Bill Gates stuff. And then we got Mushroom Man saying give your bees the mushroom and it kills the mites. It's pretty silly. So that's all our stories today. So I'll just go ahead and sum them up. Our first story today was the Epstein updates. So we got Trump in the media multiple times the last few days saying, don't talk about Epstein. It's fake news. And we also have the U.S. House Republicans voting to block the release of the files. There's no good news on Epstein, but that is like the news. That's what's going on. Mainstream media is running around saying, oh, Trump's base is turning on him and House Republicans are trying to block the Epstein files. But it seems more like everyone's mad that the Epstein files aren't released. And then people in the government just don't want to get primaried by Trump if they vote to release these files. So I kind of think that's what's going on here. That was the Epstein update. Our next story, we talked about the 2 Chinese nationals that got caught smuggling biohazards into U of M. There's a federal investigation now. They're looking at, again, U of M's federal funding because they're so lax with their lab procedures that they could be taken advantage of by like a different country.
Maybe it's designed like that.
Yeah, maybe it's purposely designed like that. So yeah, the federal investigation is like, look, if they brought that into the lab, like it should have been documented and they should have caught that whoever brought it in, they should have verified like where it came from and they didn't do that. So there are other lawsuits going on. There's other investigations going on against universities for similar stuff like this. So it's worth going over. Let me see if I can find like a good quote from the article that sums it up. Yeah, some people have said that the school downplays the vulnerabilities of research collabs with Chinese institutions and that it could be a threat because China could like steal technology because of it. And so I guess there's some kind of federal investigation looking into that. And we're probably going to follow this story as it develops. Our third story was the raids in the pot farm in California. In Camarillo, and it looks like they got 361 illegals, 14 were children, and it was a pot farm, so you're not actually allowed to work unless you're 21 on these pot farms, which is something I learned today. And so that's kind of why that these children laborers are like a bigger deal than normal, also because they're illegal. And they shouldn't be working specifically at that farm because they're not 21. It's a pot farm. We also went over the 57-year-old guy who jumped off 3 stories and died because he was so scared of the ICE agents. Most likely,
That makes no sense.
That's why he jumped off. Like he didn't want to get detained. He was trying to run away.
I don't want to go back to my old country. I'd rather die.
But here, this is like the reason he might be thinking that is because Newsom goes around saying the agents detain U.S. citizens, they racially profile, they tear families apart, they disappear you, and they put you in detention centers. Like, Newsom's like fear-mongering so these ICE agents leave his state. But I think this Jamie Garcia guy like believed that kind of rhetoric and was so scared of getting caught by ICE that he jumped off 3 stories and died. And check this out. It's happened before. It happened in World War II in Saipan. So like the Japanese had the island and the US was taking it. And as they took it, the like citizens of the island had so much like anti-American propaganda from the Japanese that a lot of them like jumped off, like hundreds of them like jumped off a cliff because they were so scared of getting captured. Basically what I talked about is how this kind of like lies about ICE could be dangerous because it gets people like actually scared, I think, that they might jump off a building instead of getting deported. When it's like, just get deported, man. Don't jump off the building. A lot of news stories when this guy first died were trying to say like ICE pushed him off or something. That's actually not what happened. He tried to jump off. So if you believe that, that's actually fake news. He was just trying to get away and thought he would like not die, I guess, but it was too big of a jump. So then our last story, we went over the bees. So there's this parasitic mite that is causing the honeybee collapse. The USDA found that out, even though we've seen some news stories that Trump cuts have virtually killed that research because of like funding cuts across the USDA. We've even seen other articles in previous episodes that say like, because of the Trump cuts, a bunch of USDA workers got fired. That was also not true. And then we see here that there is research being done, and they found out why these honeybees are collapsing. It's this parasitic mite. And then we talk about Paul Stamets. He knows about this mushroom that we watched a video about here. It's like a fungus that you put on your bees that keeps the mites away, basically. And it's proven by USDA to work, and it's approved by the USDA. So it's probably a really good solution to deal with this parasitic mite. So now that the beekeepers know what the problem is, they can implement things to fix it. And that's like how the world works, with or without more USDA funding. That's why we covered it. We had covered the bees in the past, but we kind of left off before this study came out. And if you like these kind of stories, subscribe to the channel, check out our other podcast episodes. We do it once a week on Wednesday, these long form episodes at 4 p.m. And we do them live on Twitch. And throughout the week, if there's any other like breaking news stories worth covering, we'll do a little smaller episode about that. Those are always fun. We'll do like Epstein stuff. We'll do like ice raid stuff, or just anything else that's really popular in the news that week. And if you have anything you want us to cover, send us an email, leave a comment. We'll check it out. And have a great night.